Welcome to Untangling the Gospel. I'm Doug. Matthew chapter 12 has the account of Jesus doing some things on the Sabbath that really irritated the Pharisees and scribes. They claimed it was illegal, and he showed them some passages in the scriptures that proved otherwise. In rebuttal, those men, those religious zealots, they demanded that he give them a supernatural sign to prove that he had God's authority to correct them. To that he said, "The only sign you evil men will get is one you've already had. It's the sign of Jonah, the one where he was in the belly of the great fish for 3 days and 3 nights, and so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. Then he added, the wicked men of Nineveh from Jonah's story will stand up and testify against you on Judgment Day. And so will the Queen of the South, the Queen who came to the great King Solomon for wisdom. Today, something greater than Jonah and something greater than Solomon is here with you." Right there, Christ connected his life with Jonah's. And he wasn't one who would tie his reputation to a bad person. So when we read Jonah's story and we label him as being rebellious or disobedient because he didn't do what God told him to do, we might just be missing something big in that story. Jonah begins with God telling him to go to Nineveh and preach against it because the wickedness of the men there had come to his attention. Now, Nineveh was about 500 miles to the east. It was a great city, the capital of Assyria, where Mosul of Iraq is. Well, rather than go there, Jonah immediately went to Joppa, the nearby port city on the Mediterranean. And he bought a ticket for passage on a sailing ship that was headed for Tarshish, the great marketplace of the time. It was about a 2,500-mile trip across the sea where Spain is. When he got on board, Jonah went below deck toward the stern of the ship. It wasn't long before a fierce storm arose, and the men feared for their lives. Jonah had already told them that he was running away from God, so the captain went below deck and woke him up, asked Jonah, Who are you?" And Jonah said, I'm a Hebrew. I'm one who worships and fears God." Well, the captain asked him to pray for the storm to come to a peaceful end. Meantime, the crew was casting lots to find out just who was that storm targeted at. It came up, of course, to Jonah. In an effort to keep the ship afloat, they wanted to lighten it. They cut loose the cargo and threw it overboard. When Jonah came up from the hold, they asked him, "What do we do to save our lives?" And he says, "The only way you're going to live is if you throw me overboard." Well, they prayed to his God and said, "Please don't hold us accountable for killing this innocent man." Then they threw him overboard, and we know the rest of that story. It's God provided a great fish to swallow Jonah. When I told that story of Jonah, I gave it through the obvious, the literal, or easy to understand point of view. The other one, the more hidden one, is the one that Jesus talked about when he was on the road with his 2 disciples going to Emmaus after his resurrection. And he said that beginning with Moses and the prophets, that the scriptures were about him. This time, I want to go over that story again, showing that He is the one who's dealing with us. Jonah went to Joppa after hearing that the people of Nineveh were wicked. That's what Christ did. He knew we were wicked. And so he came to earth, Joppa. And at Joppa, he bought a ticket. He paid a price. That price is described in Philippians as giving up every bit of his godly abilities. He did that so that he could be here with us, taking on the form of a human, of a man, so that we would know him and we would know that he knows us. Now, that being the case, he got on board at Joppa, or at some point in your life and some point in my life, because each one of us is a ship. We've gone through life to some point. We've had experiences. We've gone over the sea. We've been thrown about by the waves. The big ones that come crashing over the bow of the ship, the times when we're down in the bottoms of the shallow part of the water, and all the time we're being driven along by wind in our sail. The sails are filled with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is what's named from Genesis onward as being the breath, the wind. It was breathed into Adam. It's what drives us toward our destination. And the sea is an adversary. It's against us all the time. It's pushing us here and there. Well, as we travel through this sea, and with Christ having boarded us and now being asleep down within us, we come across a great storm. And that storm is, of course, caused by the wind. It's the wind on the sea that stirs it up, that churns it. It's the wind that blows us in all directions. And here it is, making it chaotic for the men on board that ship. The ship we have has a cargo on it. The cargo is our abilities. It's what we own. It's our influences. It's all our goodnesses. It's everything we have of value is strapped to that ship. After it's gotten into this terrible storm, again, caused by the Holy Spirit, the captain comes down and talks to Jonah. The captain, being our soul, goes and questions Christ and says, "Who are you really?" And he says, "I'm the Son of God, the God who made the entire creation. It's him I serve, and I'm the reason that the storm is upon you, so that you will have to go through a terrible difficulty, so that you will recognize you need me." Meanwhile, the crew is up on board, up on deck, scrambling for their lives, scared to death. And each one of them is praying out to their own gods what they think is important. The crew, those various members of the crew, represent our emotions. Maybe we could label one of those crew members as anger, another one anxiety, another one depression, another one whatever. The crew is scurrying about the ship, scared for its life. And they're looking for an answer. It says that crew cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. In other words, our emotions finally settled in on the fact that they weren't the answer. They didn't know what to do. The cargo they had, with all its greatness, its value, its position, its authority, That's what we have. That's what our cargo that we would take to say to the pearly gates, to the day of judgment. We'd say, well, look who I am. Look what I've done good. Look at me. And what are they doing? They're cutting the straps. They're throwing the cargo overboard, and it still doesn't help. Then they asked Jonah, what do we do? How can we save ourselves? And Jonah said, just what Christ said. I got to be killed. Throw me overboard. Throw me overboard and kill me. So they did. So we do. We accept the fact that he was in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, that we are saved. And it's not without a promise, because he has left us with his Spirit, still filling our sails, that he will always be with us and never forsake us. Just because we threw him overboard, and just because he died, and just because we're safe, because we're safe. We're safe in God's arms. We still go through life headed toward our destinations like Tarshish. And when we get there, to that destination, and we are ready to hand over our cargo and say, this is what I've done with my life, we'll see that we have nothing. There's nothing there. Our cargo hit the sea a long time ago. And that's what God is pleased to see. The only thing we have is Christ. And it's through God's grace that we are alive and that we will be with him eternally. That is the gospel. That is the good news. Well, I hope this story of Jonah is intriguing to you. And when you read it, you'll realize that Jonah was never a defiant or disobedient man. It's just a hidden story, hidden from unbelievers. You know, when Jesus was talking to some of his disciples, and he would talk to the people in parables, and they'd say to him, and the disciples would say to him, why do you talk in parables? Why don't you just talk plainly to them? And he says, no. Then anyone would understand and be saved. The message has to be understood by believing in him, by trusting him to be our salvation. Well, until next time. See you then.